Greetings, Financial Inclusion Week participants. I'm Professor Melita Sawyer, the director of the Fletcher School Leadership Program for Financial Inclusion. At Fletcher, we support policymakers to develop human-centered policies that solve real evidence-based problems and that can be feasibly implemented. During this fireside chat, central bank policymakers from the Seychelles and Fiji, who are Fletcher Fellowship alumni, Lapani Uluinaviti of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, and Cyril Benoitin of the Central Bank of Seychelles, share insights on how a human-centered policy development approach enabled them to implement new and effective policies to support MSMEs to cope with increasingly frequent and severe climate-related shocks. These policies speak directly to Financial Inclusion Week's theme this year of building resilience and well-being during rising uncertainties. We'll discuss how focusing on understanding both clients' needs and the interests of critical stakeholders, including public and private sector actors, facilitates feasible implementation of potentially transformative policies. I hope you enjoy and learn from our conversation. Thanks for watching. Hello, Financial Inclusion Week. Thank you so much for joining us today for this short fireside chat. Today, we're going to be discussing the resilience of MSMEs facing climate-related shocks, and we're going to focus on developing human-centered policies in vulnerable island nations. I'm Professor Melita Sawyer, and I direct the Fletcher School Leadership Program for Financial Inclusion. I am delighted to be joined today by two incredible champions of inclusive finance. I'm joined by Lapani Uluinaviti of the Reserve Bank of Fiji. Welcome, Lapani. Thank you so much for being here. I'm also joined by Cyril Benoitin of the Central Bank of Seychelles. Cyril, thank you so much for being here today. Both of these incredible policymakers are working directly to build on Financial Inclusion Week's theme of this year, which, as we know, is building resilience and well-being during rising uncertainties. I had the privilege of getting to know both Cyril and Lapani when they participated in the Fletcher School Leadership Program for Financial Inclusion Fellowship, which I teach in. And through that fellowship, policymakers deeply investigate financial inclusion challenges, and they design feasible policy solutions. Both Cyril and Lapani designed policies through their fellowship to strengthen the resilience of MSMEs to climate and weather-related shocks in their respective small developing island states. And I'm very proud to say that just 2 years after their fellowship completed, both Cyril and Lapani have made real strides in implementing those policies and benefiting the MSMEs that they're working to serve. Cyril, your policy idea focused on building the resilience of MSMEs in Seychelles, particularly in the tourism sector, to climate shocks. And you really thought very broadly and comprehensively and proposed a bundle of policies that you proposed in what is now the National Roadmap on MSMEs' access to sustainable finance in Seychelles. And Lapani, your policy had a slightly different focus. You were focused on enhancing the resilience of women-led MSMEs in the rural and maritime areas of Fiji against extreme weather events. And your policy solutions have included parametric insurance and awareness campaigns, helping that audience to understand the potential benefits of financial services. Both of you have made really exciting progress in implementing your policy solutions to build resilience. And you and your central banks are truly to be commended for being in the vanguard and leading in this urgently important space. Thank you so much again for joining me today. To begin our conversation, let me ask you both, What do you see as exciting or hopeful policy opportunities in your countries to support MSMEs who are so vulnerable to climate and weather related shocks? What opportunities do you see policy wise to help them strengthen their resilience to climate and weather shocks right now? And Cyril, may I start with you? Would you please share your thoughts first?
All right. Thank you, Malida, and thank you for inviting me to be here today on the panel. So within the context of Seychelles, what we're seeing now is actually greater momentum from all relevant stakeholders in aligning with the sustainable finance framework. One key area in terms of development, especially for the MSME sector, is that alongside the government, we've been able to work on existing credit guarantee schemes, whereby we've extended the scope to actually include climate as a priority area for MSMEs to have access to finance. So we are seeing that greater momentum based on discussions and as well as the political will, especially from the government, to drive these initiatives, especially for the MSME sector, who contributes largely to our GDP, in some instances up to 70% of the GDP. So the government, and even with the central bank, there is now that greater coordination and collaboration for us to build greater access to finance for the MSME sector so that they can implement climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cyril. And I'm glad to hear that there's that political opening right now, right? Which we know is always so essential to make progress in any of our work. Yeah. What combination of things do you think has created this political opening right now for some of these like very important and very innovative policy ideas that you're proposing?
One thing is we're seeing the increasing impacts of climate change on the island. For instance, especially in terms of the coastline, this is where especially a lot of the tourism activities are taking place. And tourism is our main economic pillar. So anything that happens to the tourism sector, both directly or indirectly, has a significant impact on the Seychelles economy in general. So this is one thing that has significantly pushed for the political will. Moreover, there is now greater coordination and collaboration. This has been made effective through the establishment of a climate finance working group. So these involve representatives, especially technical staff more so, who are driving such projects from both the public and private sector. So this working group is being used to drive the sustainable finance framework, as well as implementing various policies and strategies to drive that access to finance for MSMEs, especially those in the tourism sector.
Thank you so much, Cyril. That is very exciting that the working group is happening and driving change and that you politically have all those interests aligned. So congratulations on contributing to creating this moment. Okay. Lapani, what aspects of your work are feeling exciting or hopeful right now as you work on this critically important work of helping MSMEs build their resilience to climate and weather related shocks?
Yes, thank you, Melida. And, I share the same sentiment as Cyril in acknowledging Fletcher and yourself and the team for allowing me to be part of this event. Look, for us, similar to what Cyril has mentioned, the momentum in country in terms of the various stakeholders who are all responsible for ensuring that and the building of innovation in the MSME sector. That same momentum is with Fiji, and it's led by the Ministry of Trade and MSMEs itself. And for us, various key policies, including what mentioned about access to finance. So for us, access to finance, we know that's always been an issue. Similar to Cyril, for us, the MSME, it's like an engine of our country as well, because of our economy, it's represent about 60 to 70% of the workforce in the country. And we are seeing that, the momentum not only by the government but also by the private sector in terms of looking at how we are driving the MSME sector. But then, zoning in specifically to the work that I'm doing, the hopeful thing for me is the impact that I can see that the work that I'm doing is having on smallholder farmers, on micro informal micro businesses, because those who really need assistance, especially when it comes to the aspect of being resilient in the face of the various climate related challenges that we face as a country. We've been fortunate enough in the last 5 years. The major cyclone that we had was TC Winston in 2016, but it doesn't take away the fact that Fiji remains vulnerable as a small island economy to this uh, large the cyclones and heavy rainfalls which lead to flooding. So the work that I'm doing relating to parametric insurance is having that impact. And in this 1 year that I've been working on this policy area and implementation, and the another policy that is just coming out that we are as an outcome of this is that we are going to be working on a specific MSME parametric insurance product specifically for the MSME sector. So that's another hopeful area that I'm, working on together with relevant stakeholders who are working in this parametric ecosystem.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lapani. That is indeed very exciting, and I'm glad that you're already bringing into our conversation the end users, right? The owners, the employees of those MSMEs whose resilience you are trying to support. And that is indeed really exciting that product development is happening already to be more tailored to their needs and to be accessible to them. And I know that both of you have done extensive work engaging directly with MSMEs to understand their challenges, the barriers that they face. And I want you to take us into that part of the policy development process, if you would, engaging with those stakeholders, those customers, to really define the specific problems that you seek to solve through policy. And I know that for that direct engagement for both of you looked like going out and having conversations with those individuals, talking and listening to those MSME owners. Can you tell us a little bit about how listening to those customers informed your policy development process? Lapani, you focused on the enhancing the resilience of MSMEs, specifically those in rural areas, maritime areas, so including smallholder farmers. And often you are applying a gender lens and focusing on women-led MSMEs. And I'd like to understand how both of those characteristics in Fiji, being a woman-led MSME and being in the rural and maritime areas, that tends to make MSMEs more vulnerable along both of those dimensions. Those MSMEs are more likely to be informal, less likely to have access to formal finance. And so as you went out and spoke directly with MSMEs, smallholder farmers, and women owners of MSMEs, how did those conversations shape your understanding of the specific issues that you're now targeting with your policy solutions?
Yes, thank you, Malada. So when I came back from Fletcher, sorry, just going a bit back here in terms of when I returned from Fletcher after completing the course, I didn't realize that I would be thrown directly into the fire in terms of to lead a project that was right along the line of what my proposed policy solution was. And so, as you mentioned in your introduction about, I'm working on parametric insurance and creating awareness to women-led MSMEs. And you've rightly said in terms of them being informal in the sense that they are in the rural and the maritime areas. And for us, this first year of the project, our target in terms of creating awareness or going out to create awareness and outreach was to 10,000 people. And we've managed to achieve that in the end of the first year, in end of July. And you're part of the key stakeholders in that ecosystem who worked on introducing parametric insurance to Fiji. They carried out that research that developed the initial product that were tested in the market, that were in the market before the RBF officially came in to lead the work on implementing parametric microinsurance. And these are the type of solution when we're talking about climate risk financing strategies. These are actually solutions that are needed for our informal sector. Our smallholder farmers, women own small businesses, women fisher women, and so when we were carrying out awareness throughout this past 1 year, we sort of saw the fact that the way the product, the parametric insurance product, was designed. It was customized to some extent to meet their needs, to allow them to be resilient. Because for us, it's almost the same when we had the demand survey back in 2020. The outcome is still the same, and we go out and create awareness. Women are the key players after the event, the cyclone or the heavy rainfall that lead to flooding in those areas. Women are the key players who get the household to recover quickly, or to recover or to sustain the household after the cyclone event or rainfall event. So that's how the design of the product was done to suit their needs also. So for us, when we went out into the field and carry out awareness, we tried to listen to different type of farmers, different type of small businesses, and we tried to understand what was actually that they need from the type of the solution that's already in the market. And so for us, coming as a regulator, we try to see whether there needs to be a revision, a variant to the current existing solution that's in the market, so that we can tailor it to their needs. And we've been able to do that this time around. So at the end of the first year in July, and then we work with our risk modelers to try and tweak the product, so that it's, because what is coming out from what we gathered from the awareness that we carried out and the workshops that we carried out, is that women is saying that the product was not really providing the recovery, the amount of payouts that were being given were not meeting the funding that's required to be more resilient, to recover quickly. So that's something that we took into account in reviewing the insurance product that's already in the market.
Thank you so much, Lopani. That's great to hear about how, like, the listening to customers, it informed what you did at the beginning. It informed including those awareness campaigns as you rolled out the parametric insurance, and bravo for reaching 10,000 people through those campaigns in the first year. That's really incredible. And then it's really nice to hear about how you continued to speak with them and are and continuing to adjust the product offering based on those conversations. And given how important women are in rebuilding after a weather-related shock, and you're hearing from them they needed larger payout amounts and things like that, how do you think that is unique to those women-led MSMEs? Is that true of all of the MSMEs that you're trying to reach with the parametric insurance? I'm curious what you think might be essential to really driving uptake of the parametric insurance product among, in particular, those women-led MSMEs. Is it the awareness piece? Is it a different payout structure? Are there particular features of the product or the entire policy approach that you think are essential for reaching those women in particular?
Yeah. So, thank you for the question. So, as I think that comes to the point of this type of financing strategies or this type of the insurance product, and that the target groups that we have, of course, are the vulnerable groups and the women. They are sort of new to the concept of insurance. So we've addressed it through the awareness that we carry out, and through the outreach events and through workshops, etc., and working with the distribution partners who are um, the smallholder farmers or the small MSME or the small micro business are their members. But then we've got to work on the other end in terms of the increase in the uptake of the insurance product. So that can only happen given the nature of who they are, being small micro businesses and smallholder farmers. The only way that the increase in the uptake or scaling can happen is through premium subsidy. And for us, as a policy measure, the bank, through the product, through the funding that came from our co-grant funder in terms of Insurance Resilience Solution Fund, the governor, in terms of his leadership of the Reserve Bank, he made a conscious decision that in order to scale up the product, we needed to commit funds for premium subsidies as well. So that really helped improve the numbers from before the year before that we came in the Reserve Bank, the numbers had really fallen down to about less than 1,000. And after the first year, we managed to reach total policyholders of around 4,246. And testament to that was the fact that the government made that conscious decision that we needed to, as a policy decision, to provide premium subsidy so that we can help scale up. And they've experienced for the last 2 years, but some of them, these new policyholders, they can experience the benefit of the product, and maybe in future, then we can see how we can tear down the premium subsidy level that we do.
Thank you, Lapani. That's so interesting to hear how that combination of policy pushes supported by the Reserve Bank of Fiji, so those awareness campaigns, but then plus that premium subsidy, like really came together to drive uptake. And it's interesting to hear that might be a time-bound approach, and that might change over time as people understand the product better. They get comfortable with parametric insurance, which is a new product. So that's very exciting. Thank you. Right. Cyril, in your context, as you were trying to support the resilience of MSME owners in Seychelles, particularly MSMEs in the tourism sector, I know that you also were going out and engaging directly with those MSME owners. And I'm really curious about how those conversations there shaped your understanding of the problems to be addressed.
Thank you for that question, Malaida. At times, us as policymakers and regulators, we tend to forget that when we're developing policies or coming up with new products and services, that we need to also consult the end users, the customers, the consumers. So through that approach, I was better able to understand exactly what these MSMEs were facing, what were the challenges, so that we can actually build better policies and, working with the banking sector to come up with more tailored products and services to address the needs and issues that these MSMEs are facing. So having these conversations with them, it allowed us, especially in my case, working on the different climate change and sustainable finance products, to really relook at how we draft and implement policies, to always remember how these would impact the end users. Are they going to make better use of these products and services? How would they interact with these policies? But also how we can bring in the banking sector to better understand the issues and challenges that these customers are facing. So this allowed us to ensure that their views and consideration were taken on board, And even now, when we're devising policies and strategies, we open it up for consultation to these end users compared to initially when we were only collaborating with the government or the banking sector. Now there's this greater coordination and collaboration, even with the end users, so that they can have a voice to highlight any challenges in terms of policy consideration, how it would impact them, be it positively or negatively, that we can also address certain issues on our end to ensure that anything that we're implementing is effectively made use of to their own benefit. So this was actually a great opportunity for me to better understand in terms of designing policies, what considerations we should be considering, and that these users, as the end users, their voice needs to be heard as part of these considerations and discussions.
Thank you for sharing that, Cyril. That's really exciting that the end user is now part of that consultation process when a policy idea is being proposed. That feels very revolutionary. And can you paint us a picture of what that looks like? As you have a policy draft. I know for the national roadmap, you have many important draft guidelines that are being developed, and you're consulting with so many stakeholders to get their feedback as part of that process. Can you tell us, what does that look like to involve the end user in that policy consultation process?
So in that sense, we've now we're making use of different approaches. One would be the usual, we just issue a press communique to highlight, look, there's this paper that we've worked on. It's accessible on our website, and we welcome the views and feedback from members of the public. Even as individual households, you would be eventually impacted by these policies. Not all of them are always directed towards businesses or the banking sector. We also now conduct focus group with different stakeholders that would be impacted by policy considerations. We've also now created specific committees. For instance, now there are the government is called a joint economic forum, whereby there's the involvement of the public sector, the central bank, and the private sector. So where different areas of priority affecting businesses and the economy in general are discussed frequently, and we work on these policy considerations hand in hand. So everybody has a say as part of these discussions to ensure that everyone's voices are being heard and policy considerations are implemented for the effectiveness of everyone involved. Because at times what we're seeing is that when we as regulators introduce something, we sort of have this mindset that what we're doing would have an impact in the economy, but we never bring in those impacted within that conversation. So having implemented all of these different ways of onboarding the end users as part of these discussions and considerations, we are now better guided in terms of what really they need and what they want, for us to ensure that we also implement tailored and targeted initiatives. So that has been working very well. And the private sector has actually even welcomed these such initiatives. And even now, we're actually seeing them wanting to drive a lot of these initiatives, because previously, a lot of things, for them, it would be the government or the central bank driving this, and then they only coming at a later stage. We are now seeing them taking the initiative to drive a lot of change within the economy. And this is exactly what we wanted to see. So it has, at the end of the day, become a bit more fruitful for us to adopt such approaches.
Thank you, Cyril. And thank you for framing it that way. I'm glad that that has been your experience and that you're even seeing the private sector, seeing that having more participation from more stakeholders, including the end users, is creating more effective policies, more fruitful policies or products. And it's not just a nice to have that more people are participating in the process, but it's actually leading to better outcomes and more efficient outcomes. That's really exciting that that's the experience you're having in Seychelles. Thank you. And I want to follow up on what you were just mentioning regarding the private sector. And I know that so much of your work at Central Bank of Seychelles involves like that proactive coordination among all of these different stakeholders and engaging proactively with private sector banks, in particular to provide climate-related credit facilities to their customers, including MSMEs. And can you tell us about how that collaboration has gone over the last few years? Were the banks initially interested in offering green and blue credit facilities for MSMEs? Are they interested now? How has that engagement been progressing for you?
One good thing that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic is that even the banks started to listen to their customers. So whilst, yes, we started with the climate change and sustainable finance project back in 2020, but it's been more so in terms of capacity building before we roll out specific policies or strategies. But what we saw surprisingly is that the banks also decided to take a proactive approach. So they started introducing blue-green facilities without us having to come to them and tell them, look, this is a new challenge that we're facing. How can you step up and assist your customers? So they took a very much a proactive approach and started to offer blue facilities, green facilities, and this is continuing to increase in the system. So we are seeing a lot of the banks now introducing either for individuals and businesses or a bundled product whereby they are introducing these facilities, both products and services, for the benefit of their customers with better terms and conditions compared to the traditional commercial loans, so that customers can effectively tap into those facilities. Even we've seen a lot of some of them introducing SME centers and having tailored products for the MSMEs for climate mitigation and adaptation purposes. So yes, now we've started a bit more of these engagement with the banks, but it's more so now looking at how we can assist them with effectively managing climate-related financial risk. And as we continue these discussions, we see more and more how they become more intrigued to assist businesses. Some of them have even started through their corporate social responsibilities, endorsing marine parks, mangrove sites, where even their staff are heavily involved with going for cleanups or even with planting corals. So it's not only about putting up products for their clients, but also how them as an institution can work alongside the government to ensure that our economy becomes more sustainable. So we're actually very much appreciative of the efforts that we're seeing from the banking sector, whilst we work collaboratively with them on this project.
Thank you. That's so interesting to hear about that evolution and how the pandemic did, help us all to really appreciate some of our vulnerabilities, and how listening to the end user is critically important for the end users, but also for our institutions and our health in our institutions. Thank you. One thing I wanted to ask a little bit more about, Cyril, and we've been using these terms, blue finance, green finance, is this issue of taxonomy. And I know that one essential part of the national roadmap that you've been working on, and this is an issue that many countries have front and center right now, is this issue of climate finance taxonomy, defining the key terms, coming to an agreement about what green finance means, what blue finance means. And one of your recent accomplishments was leading that process in Seychelles to draft and implement national definitions for sustainable finance, climate finance, blue finance, and green finance. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Were the stakeholders aligned? Were they not aligned? How did you come to agreement around those definitions? And then the follow-up would be, what are you hoping that those agreed upon definitions now will enable you to do in Seychelles?
All right. Thank you for that question. These are still ongoing discussions that we're having with even the government and the private sector. With regards to the national definitions, this was actually a very long journey. But how we started with the process is that we did a stock taking exercise. So we effectively met with a number of stakeholders, both public and private, including the NGOs driving a lot of the climate work here in Seychelles. We did a stock taking exercise to see, in terms of level understanding, have they implemented any definitions within their own space? What are the challenges? What are they doing? What are the benefits? And we sort of grouped all of this in together and, assessed what is really missing and what do we as a central bank need to do to assist as part of the work within the climate space. So this is where the work for the national definitions came in, because what we saw was that there was no definition being used locally. We were sort of just adopting international definitions, but as people would know, there are no internationally agreed definitions within that space. There was already a lot of work being done by the government within the blue economy space. So we also leveraged on their expertise on that area. And we did a lot of research to understand what other countries are doing. And this is where we drafted the policy paper for the definitions. After having that paper in place, along with the proposed definitions, we roll out an extensive consultation process. We met with the relevant ministries to basically showcase what we've done and what we've come up with so that we can get their input. Because obviously, when we roll out these initiatives, they would have to be part of these initiatives. We met with the banks, again, the similar process, presenting the definitions, getting their input with the NGOs, and even rolled it out to the members of the public. So we invited members of the public to consult the document, have their say and input, until we eventually all agreed on a specific definition for all of these 4 thematic areas. This was subsequently presented to the Cabinet of Ministers alongside the President to ensure that there was that national endorsement from the government, because these definitions would then be used for other climate change and sustainable finance projects that we would be rolling out eventually. Thankfully, this was well received and fully endorsed by the Cabinet of Ministers. So the next phase now is that we're also working with the Ministry of Finance, because they're looking at now climate tagging. So we're looking at how we can identify from the government's budget what are the different expenses or revenue in terms of climate finance. So this groundwork and adoption of the national definitions have effectively been used to roll out in terms of where such financing would be grouped as in terms of sustainable finance, climate finance, blue finance, and green finance. And it's also being used by the banking sector to know exactly how to devise their products and services to align with these definitions. But because these definitions also take into consideration environment, social, and governance indicators. So the definitions sort of sets the scene of what we want both the public sector and the private sector to do as regards sustainable finance and climate change in general. So any other of the additional work that we're doing now, we use these definitions as the foundation for the work. So it has greatly assisted in terms of having a structured approach for everyone involved in this journey to ensure that we're all in alignment.
Cyril, thank you so much for sharing that about that incredibly involved and consultative process that you went through to arrive at these national definitions. I'm hearing from many of our Fletcher alumni that that is just a critical process as they want to work more in green finance, blue finance, climate-related finance, that roadblock of the taxonomy and the definitions is something that they have to contend with at the beginning. And thank you for sharing what that journey has been like for you. It sounds like it was challenging, but so worthwhile. And I hope that all of that hard work is now going to make the next steps smoother.
Hopefully.
Yes. Yeah. Lopati and Cyril, I'd love to get your thoughts on one final question during this fireside chat, and that's related to the utility of spaces like this, like Financial Inclusion Week, and other global forums that are related to climate finance, to the important work that you're doing. As Seychelles, Fiji, and other small island developing states are working hard, leading in this space to increase resilience to climate and weather shocks, what do you think the value is of these global spaces for collaboration, for sharing lessons, for asking critically important questions? Why did you think it was worthwhile to participate in this forum? And I know you're participating in many other similar spaces as well. Lapani, would you mind starting and sharing your thoughts on that question first?
Yes, thank you, Malena. And I think for us small island nation, the answers is very obvious. Yeah? But for small developing states like Fiji, such global platform on climate finance and related subjects, these are opportunities for us for dialogue. They're sort of a lifeline for us in terms of how we can enhance innovation, how we can scale up our product. Because for the Pacific and a small island nation, that's one of the key things that it's like always a key barrier that we face. We may have all the factors that we need to push forward policies to implement a solution, but scale always becomes the barrier. So, the lessons that we learn from other Pacific, from other island nations, and from other developed countries, when we go to this type of different platform forum, that's it really helps us, and we're able to share lessons, as you mentioned, from us being from the front line of climate vulnerability. We learn what's working in other island nation and how we can adapt those insights into our context. And I think that's basically what we also did related to parametric insurance. It was working in other countries, but we brought it to Fiji, and then we contextualized it to how what's needed. We'll carry out the research, and that gets recognized in this international forum, and that creates exposure for us also in terms of not only what we can learn, but also the sharing our lessons to other Pacific Island countries, or to other countries similar to ours. And we got recognized in while I was in AFI last year, in terms of that AFI award that we received for promoting financial inclusion in Fiji. Um, the very same thing that I'm proud of where Seychelles is and where it's heading in terms of what they were talking about in terms of the definition, and from our involvement for the international forum, etc., we are able to then also learn on this type of instruments or this type of policy innovation that can help our small country. So for us, the green finance taxonomy, that's something that's almost coming to fruition for us also. Our financial inclusion team is working very hard on that. So that should be coming out also in the next, hopefully by the end of this year. And there are other policy areas, strengthening our gender lens. This is one of the key things that we draw on from the global research and best practices, so that we can strengthen. Just this Monday's paper, it it shows the result of the report on the gender assessment that was carried out on the type of financial products that are available in Fiji, and whether how financial institutions in developing products, what type of gender lens do they apply on that. And I guess the conclusion of that report is there was a lot of needing improvement for our financial institution. So I think it's very important, and I think the benefit of this type of forum, and even the one that I'm on today with you and Cyril, listening to Cyril also, it's just amazing what Seychelles is doing, and I'm sure. I'm hopeful that one day I'll be able to go down to Seychelles to do some studies. Thank you, Melena.
Thank you so much, Lapani. Thank you. Cyril, Lapani mentioned AFI, the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, and I know that you're also very active in AFI and in various working groups. And can you tell us a little bit about why that's useful for you and the Central Bank of Seychelles? Yeah.
First of all, I echo a lot of what Lepani has mentioned. In addition, it's about making our voices heard as small island developing states. When we attend a lot of these international forums, a lot of the times the discussions are focused around the more developed countries, what they're doing. Even when international agreements are developed, it's always focused about what the more developed countries are doing. For us, small island developing states, our vulnerabilities are different, and it's always specific to our island nations. So this is where we use these platforms to make our voices heard, that, yes, we're part of these international discussions, but you also need to look at us in terms of what we are facing as an island nation, because our vulnerabilities are specific to our country. So we want those voices to be heard so that agreements and policy strategies can take these things into considerations. For instance, for Seychelles, we are a very, very small open economy. We have only 120,000 in population, but we're classified as a high-income country. And because of that, it makes us being ineligible for concessional financing. It has effectively closed the door for us because we do need access to financing as a country to assist the economy in terms of development and sustainability. But because of these international agreements, the door has effectively closed for us to be able to get access to finance. This is why we use such platforms to highlight what challenges we're facing and how we want policymakers to relook at what they're doing on the international scale, and to ensure that our voice is being heard and our considerations are reflected in those discussions, to ensure that we do get access to finance, especially to the climate vulnerabilities that we're facing, because our GHG emissions are relatively non-existent, yet we're actually feeling the full brunt of those climate impacts. We're now seeing even higher sea level rise. Our weather pattern has changed significantly, but we do not have access to finance for us to adapt and mitigate climate events. So this is why we use these forums to bring out our efforts, what we're doing, because we're not just here to voice out our concerns, but also what we're doing within the capacity that we have in addressing these challenges, and that we are ready to collaborate with other stakeholders, both regionally and internationally, so that we can all come up together with specific policies and strategies for the betterment of the world, because we're all facing this climate challenge. So these platforms are of great significance for us, and we will continue to make use of these platforms to make our voices heard.
Thank you so much, Cyril. Thank you for that. I want to thank you both very much, Cyril Benoitin of the Central Bank of Seychelles and Lapani Uluinaviti of the Reserve Bank of Fiji. Thank you so much for joining me in this global space created by CFI's Financial Inclusion Week. I am so grateful for you sharing your time, expertise, and experience with me and with our audience. And I wish you and I wish our audience continued success in your very important endeavors. Thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malena.